Hey, health junkies! It's time for The Health Fix. Join your host, Dr. Janine Krause, as she gives you a dose of what you need to know and do right now to take control of your health from the inside out, to rebel against aging, look damn good, fight stress, and laugh every day.
Hello, health junkies. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. Our episode today is all about genetic testing and if genetic testing can help you to lose weight. So perhaps you've tried every diet in the book. Maybe you went paleo, maybe you did autoimmune paleo, maybe you did keto and nothing seemed to work for you. And perhaps maybe you got hooked on a certain superfood and then 3 weeks later you were told it was toxic and you were going to die because you drank too much of it. Sound familiar? Yeah, most of us have that issue of like, chocolate's good, chocolate's bad, coffee's great, coffee's going to kill you. Oh my goodness, it's frustrating. So perhaps you are working out a ton, you've tried CrossFit, you've done spinning, you've done 2-a-day workouts, and either that combined with the good diet's not working for you, you've hit a plateau, something of that nature. Well, guess what? It might be time to consider genetic testing. Now, the reason I wanted to do a podcast on this is because I actually recommend genetic testing in my office and did it myself. And I was a little skeptical when I did the genetic testing because I thought, oh, I know a lot about what my body wants, but I was struggling with a plateau and not being able to drop some pounds. And I thought, you know what? It's a time to see, if my thoughts on how I should be eating are working or not. So what do you assess in a genetic test for looking at diet and nutrition and the right exercise? Well, I got my test right here. You can hear me flipping with it right here, just like so. And what we're looking for is what type of diet matches your genetic makeup. We're looking at your response to fats. We're looking at your response to snacking, so behavior, so hunger, your sense of feeling full, eating disinhibition, meaning can you quit eating a certain food, your food desire, how much of a sweet tooth do you have? Like, this is crazy, but our genetics can tell us what we tend towards. Also, our metabolism of caffeine, if we have lactose intolerance, if we flush with alcohol. It can also tell us, our genetics can also tell us about our nutritional needs, such as what B vitamins we might need, vitamins A, C, D, E. Now, the other cool thing about this testing is that we can look at our types of exercise that we benefit from most. So endurance versus short strength training versus muscle power. Also, we could look at weight loss responses to exercise, our blood pressure response to exercise, our cholesterol response to exercise, in addition to our loss of body fat response, our insulin sensitivity, and also the ability to gain weight fast after losing weight. It's kind of cool. Also, genetic testing can tell you how prone you are to obesity, how slow, fast, etc. your metabolism is. It's quite cool. And another big thing that genetic testing looks at is your cholesterol, in terms of you metabolizing cholesterol, and if you're more prone to elevated cholesterol, triglycerides, so that's your storage of fat, and blood sugar. So I did a test called Pathway Genomics Pathway Fit, and it's the type of test that I actually offer in my office for patients to assess, okay, maybe they've hit a plateau, maybe they're just not losing weight. What the heck's up with their genetics? What should they be doing? Because there's so many books out there about not eating grains, so no pain, no gain, by Dr. Osborne, great book. We've got the whole ketogenic thing. We've got the autoimmune paleo. We've got the paleo. And essentially, these are great diets, but they don't work for everybody. And there's some reasons why. And I've tried paleo and I've done keto as well. And I didn't lose, I lost weight at first and then I hit a plateau. And then I started to notice that I was putting on fat. So I started to get more cellulite. even though I was still weighing less. And then when I switched diets, it seemed that things ended up getting better for a little bit, and then I plateaued again. And if that's happened to you, it's possible that, you're not doing the right thing for your body. Also, a lot of us don't know what type of exercise our bodies do better with. And so if we look at our genetics, we can determine kind of a game plan, per se, as to what is going to suit us better. Now, does genetic testing give you the exact formula that you should absolutely follow and it's going to be foolproof? No. Because genetic mutations and what we're more prone to, whether it's genetic mutations or whether we have genes that are supporting having a certain type of metabolism or being more, let's say we're more suited for a certain type of diet or exercise, well, it can be adjusted based on our environment and stress and things of that nature. So I don't want anyone to think that genetic testing is the end all be all, but it could give some insight in terms of what you ought to try to suit better to your genetics. So one of the big things that was popular back in the early 2000s, late 90s is your diet for your blood type, which you could say was kind of a precursor to the genetics type of diet. But since then, we completed the sequencing of the human genome in 2003. We've only had 14 years in trying to research all of this material to figure out what to do with these genes that we now sequenced and we know more information about. So technically we're kind of on the brink of learning a ton about genetic testing. We're not there yet, but I do think that it is useful to give us some information. So I don't want my folks or my patients or myself to even take it as like the Bible, like these are your rules for life and you can't divert, because we've learned from the diet for your blood type that there are some variances. And so what I typically will do with my patients is take this as a guide and then build in what we know about stress, what we know about the environment, what we know about nutritional deficiencies, what we know about someone's gut microbes, and then kind of put it all together. So one of my favorite ways to approach weight loss and get someone on a proper diet plan and get someone doing the right exercise for their body is to do the genetic testing combined with something called the Nutra-Eval. Now, I've mentioned that previously in my podcast. Nutra-Eval is a test by Genova Diagnostics that takes a look at your organic acids. And by that, I mean your metabolism. And it's looking at how do you metabolize carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. It looks at, are you metabolizing amino acids? Are you absorbing amino acids? Do you have sufficient amino acids in your body to be able to repair yourself from the exercise or what you do in a typical day? And this Nutra-Eval also tells a lot about your fatty acid balance. It tells a lot about what gut bugs might be hanging out in your gut. In fact, I like the Nutra-Eval so much that I oftentimes can't really talk folks out of doing just genetic testing or just the Nutra-Eval. I like to have both because it gives a comprehensive idea of, okay, the genetics as to what your body should be doing in terms of what you're more suitable for in terms of exercise, nutrition, and metabolism. And Nutra-Eval tells us what's going on currently in terms of what have you done up to this point, because basically, however many years you've been on this universe, you have had some environmental exposures, you have more gut bugs, you have a diversity of gut bugs or a lack of diversity of gut bugs. And so the components here, you never want to think about genetic testing as the end all be all. You definitely want to combine it with the current state of your patient, because the genetics are going to say one thing, but if you've beat your body up, you've eaten crap food for the last, let's say 40 plus years, well, that's going to have some impact on what's happening currently in your body and your ability to metabolize things. And your genes, so your genetics are going to say what you should be doing, and your body's going to say, in terms of the Nutra-Eval, you're going to get information from your body in terms of what's happening right now. And taking the combination of those two pieces of information is what yields the best results with genetic testing. And I highly recommend folks, if they're interested in genetic testing, to find a doctor or find a program that if you test your genetics, you then have someone who can help you to follow up with it. Because 23andMe gives you great information, but then it's like, all right, I've got this information, what do I do with it? And most of us don't know how to translate that into taking into consideration what's happening in your life right now in terms of your body metabolically, and then taking these suggestions and kind of fusing them for a great overall plan. The good news is, though, is that we have companies like Pathway Genomics that I work with, or Arival, or Revival is however you say it. I actually don't know. It's a company in Seattle that is now working to help with custom counseling, nutrition, and exercise programs based on genetic testing and someone's current health status, which is super cool, especially how they take the whole body into account and the gut bugs. It's around $4,000 for a year program. Sounds kind of pricey, but hey, if you add up how much money and time you waste in trying to figure out what you need to do for your body, it's kind of well worth it. And I say kind of well worth it. Listen to me. It's well worth it. I can't find another program, a do-it-yourself kind of program, other than the one that comes with Pathway Genomics or Arrival or Arival, however they do say that. That's embarrassing. I should have looked that up before trying to do a podcast on it. So, anywho, those two companies, I have them labeled and links to them at the bottom of this podcast to check them out, because I really do think it's important. The other big thing is, if you like a face-to-face connection with a doc, I have quite a few folks in my world, naturopaths in particular, but also functional medicine doctors who have had extensive training in genetic testing and protocols to help folks with figuring out what to do with their genetic mutations, in addition to what their genes kind of show them as being set up for. So, for example, I'm going to give you a little rundown on me and my genetics testing and kind of give you a little sense of what I would do in a visit so that you can understand how it works. So, for example, my matching diet type is actually a low-fat diet. And I've spent a lot of my time touting the higher fat, good fat, of course, diets and low carb diet. And, I have to admit, I lost weight on a low carb diet. I definitely did well, but I never got to the point where I looked my best. I'll be honest, when I was looking my best, I was moving more. I was living in downtown Seattle, walking every day. I barely drove, and I was eating a lower fat diet, basically because I was broke. But I was eating a lower fat diet, and I was eating a lot more whole grains and veggies. And when I switched to doing more of a ketotic diet, where I was keeping my carbs down 20 grams or less, I had some issues. And so I find it very interesting that my genetics showed up that I am better suited to a low-fat diet. And by no means does this low-fat diet mean refined stuff. We're talking 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day is what it says here, which is pretty cool. That's a good amount. And honestly, I couldn't tell you prior to this test that I was eating that many fruits or veggies a day. It wasn't happening. I do it now, but heck, I couldn't do it before. It talks about grains and starchy vegetables, and it talks about consume only whole grains. And I will agree with this. And I found that I have definitely had some improvements, actually a lot of improvements, since following this type of plan, following my genetics. But I will give you the caveat that I knew that I had a lot of gut bug issues, because part of why I have this podcast and part of why I talk a lot about the digestive system is I have had the most trash gut for a long time from different experiments I've done with myself in the quest of science, but also because of certain habits. As I mentioned in previous podcasts, I talk about how I liked sugar-free gum and would make lots of trips to go get Diet Coke and things of that nature on and off. And let's face it, it trashes your gut. And in my quest for trying to get to my optimal weight, I did fall into the category of making a lot of almond flour cookies with Truvia and finding out that, oh, that was wrecking my gut. So that being said, when I'm doing genetic testing with a patient and I get the results, I'm also looking at what's currently happening with that patient. And when I got these results, I was going, okay, so a low-fat diet in terms of veggies and fruits, I know that fruit and excessive whole grains is going to cause me to have gas and bloating. I'm not going to feel too good with those. So the idea is when you're working with a doc who can help tweak this for you, that doc's going to go, okay, so let's do a little bit of a bug kill while we're working on adjusting to get you used to this low-fat style of diet. So what I had to do was I had to work on healing my gut. I had to work on killing off the gut bugs. So yeast in particular, I have a long-standing, long-term relationship with yeast and how it affects my body. And that goes back to being given a ton of antibiotics as a kid for ear infections and then being on antibiotics for acne as a teenager for 4 years, and just a long-term history, unfortunately, of antibiotics. And nevertheless, I had to work on some gut bug killing and slowly introduce grains to my diet because I couldn't go in and go, oh, I'm going to have a cup of oats cooked and that's part of my whole grain low fat diet. It didn't work that way because if I ate that, I would be constipated for like 4 days and my gut would look like I was 7 months pregnant. It would be ridiculous. And this is the thing. This is what you need to think about when you're looking at genetic testing, because you have to think about where your body's at that moment when you had the testing and then combine the two together. So that's why you definitely want a naturopathic doctor or someone who is really well versed in counseling and nutrition and exercise programs. So now let's jump to the exercise part of things. I'm going to flip my page over here. Now, one of the cool things here about Pathway Genomics is not only do they talk about what type of exercise, they talk about certain types of muscle fibers and how you respond to exercise. I apologize for the extra noise here of me flipping through. Now, for example, I am a CrossFitter. I love doing CrossFit. I love the quick bursts of doing the WODs, the workouts of the day, but I also love to lift weights. And so that's why CrossFit fits for me. And prior to getting in the CrossFit world, I was always involved in some form of long distance running combined with quick cardio intervals and weights. That was always kind of part of my life. And I can see why it always worked for me because my genetics actually mentioned that I am better. I have an enhanced benefit from endurance training. Strength training is beneficial for me. I have enhanced muscle power, and that's like that sprinter's gene, if you've ever heard of that. That's why I do like to do Tabata intervals and do well with sprinting types of exercises on and off. Also, I do respond to weight loss. In this case, it says exercise is strongly recommended. So I do have a weight loss response to exercise. I will lose some weight. And this is key because I have some patients who've had this come back. They do not respond with exercise. They don't lose weight with exercise. And so that's something to keep in mind. That's huge because I have a lot of people who are doing 2-a-day workouts, busting their butts and not getting anywhere. Well, here we have it. Genetically, they're not prone to be able to do that. So that's a big deal. And, blood pressure response to exercise, it's recommended for me. And I also have a response to insulin. So what happens, that means insulin will drop. Insulin will help my blood sugar to drop if I do exercise. And so by that means that I can lower blood sugar by exercising. Some people do not lower their blood sugar with exercise. And that's another thing to keep in mind, especially when you're diabetic and your doc's telling you to go and exercise and your blood sugars won't come down. Well, it's a genetic thing. And so something to keep in mind here. So the other side of the genetic testing is also your food behaviors and what you do with food. And in my case, I am one who has trouble saying no in terms of the foods I like. And And that's kind of funny because my genetics also have a full-on component here that I struggle with being able to say no to foods that I'm in love with, such as dark chocolate, things of that nature. And so eating behavior traits are key because there are genes that tell us that we're prone to snacking. There are genes that can tell us if we can't feel full. I have the typical full feeling, so that is possible for me. If I'm not feeling that I'm full, then I've got other issues. We need to think about it in the moment. Like, am I chewing? Am I slowing down to eat enough? And so you can see where we take the eating behavior traits and now we can help to modify responses to eating. So a lot of people who struggle with weight are emotional eaters. If they have the genetics that make them more prone to snacking, more prone to being hungry, more prone to not feel full, more prone to not be able to say no to certain foods, well, guess what? Now it's like you've got the mind thing combined with the genetic thing. You got to work on that. You got to focus on that, figure out what their triggers are. So this is important. Really important. It's also important because if someone doesn't have any eating issues currently, they could develop in the future if they come under strong amounts of stress. So you can work to prevent that. Now, another cool thing about the genetics is it tells if we're lactose intolerant or not. In my case, it says I'm lactose intolerant, and that is true. I don't get diarrhea, I get constipation, and so it's kind of cool. Not that I have constipation, but it's kind of cool that this genetic testing tells you about that. And the fun part about this is it just gives you a lot of information in terms of going, okay, if someone's noticing that they have issues with lactose, it confirms it. So that's a cool thing. Now, the other thing about the genetic testing that I really like is that it's showing the vitamin A, C, D, E, and if you need more than the average individual. And vitamins A, C, E, D, they're all huge for your immune system. They're all huge for skin tissue. They're just huge. And vitamin D in particular was a big one for me. I love the sun. I've always loved the sun. I will tell anybody and everybody I'm a sun whore, and if I get skin cancer, I really don't freaking care. I know. That sounds ridiculous, but it's because I absolutely love to be out in the sun. Guess what? My genetics say that I need more vitamin D than the average individual. It's not that I'm genetically mutated and I don't absorb the vitamin D that I go get. It's that I need more than the average individual. So something to keep in mind if you're someone that thrives off of being in the sunny environment. I live just south of Seattle. It rains a lot. Well, guess what? I need to take more vitamin D to put that into perspective. So if you have a genetic test that says that you need to optimize your intake of vitamin D and you live somewhere that is dark and rainy a lot of the time, this is good information. So this is your environment combined with your genetics. So just something to keep in mind there. Another biggie is that I need to optimize my intake of vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is critical for energy levels, but it's also critical for calming the nervous system and helping with a ton of different things in the body in terms of detoxification. And so if, for example, I push myself to the limits and I'm working at the gym really hard and I'm working, on a project really hard, and then I'm not able to relax and calm myself and I'm having trouble sleeping, guess what? It could be that my vitamin B12 levels are off, and now here we have it in terms of my genetics that I'm more prone to that. And so this is something that you can use for preventative medicine too, and keep it on board. So I really like that aspect of this genetic testing. So let's jump into the exercise portion again here of this. I had mentioned it a little bit earlier, but one of the other things that I like about having a plan for exercise is that if you know what your body responds to genetically, you're much more suited to figuring out what types of workout programs suit you best. So one, what's going to give you the best workout, but also two, what's going to keep you from getting hurt? Because there are a lot of folks that don't have the sprint capacity muscles and they're pushing themselves in the gym, like the CrossFit and things of that nature, and are getting hurt. And so that's something to keep in mind. Also, there's folks that don't respond with endurance training, but they're trying to run ultra marathons. That's not a good thing. It's something to keep in mind. Now, it's not that I'm telling you that you don't do it. You just need extra resources to help you to be able to do those sorts of things, since your genetics are basically indicating that you might not be well suited for those types of sporting events. So something to keep in mind. So we've talked a lot about my particular test results, so you have a good sense of what you would get in genetic testing. Now, my genetic testing was more specific to diet, exercise, nutrition. There are companies out there, and most of us have heard of 23andMe. In particular, and 23andMe is a do-it-yourself saliva test. And it gives you all of your genetic mutations. But in particular, the 23andMe can also give us some critical information in terms of detoxification pathways, and give us some information into mood and possible mental disorders such as ADD, also bipolar, schizophrenia, chronic fatigue issues. It's important that if you're struggling with chronic issues and you want to know what's in your genetics, I highly recommend considering going and going to the website 23andme.com. It's $199 for the test. And then when you get your kit, you swab your cheek and you give a little bit of the saliva there, and you're going to send that away. And when you get your information, taking that information and running it through something called the genetic genie. The genetic genie, and I have the link to that at the end of my show notes, is a website that helps to take your 23andMe information and put it into a category of all of your genetic mutations related to folic acid processing and detoxification pathways. And the folic acid pathway in particular is methylation. Methylation is one of the ways you detoxify. It's also how you work to recycle vitamin B12. It has a lot to do with energy levels and mood disorders. And I highly recommend anyone who has been tired their whole life. So basically you go, I was born tired and now I feel more toxic. My body hurts. I have digestive issues and I have mind issues. So by that, I mean, maybe someone's diagnosed you with bipolar and you're like, I don't really think I fit that category. Something else is wrong. This is what you want to look at. 23andMe testing is easy, do it yourself. And then Genetic Genie is what you want to run it through to be able to take that data, which literally is a list of genetic mutations, to somebody like a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine doctor who specializes in genetic medicine to help you out. And this is important for those of you who are dealing with chronic issues that are beyond just, why can't I lose weight? What's going on with that? Or what kind of exercise do I want to do? If you're noticing that you have mental issues where you're chronically depressed, where you are chronically anxious, and at the same time you're extremely fatigued and you have days where it's hard to get out of bed and things of that nature, and maybe none of the antidepressants are working for you, or you're struggling with fighting with yourself in terms of you're pretty much convinced that there's got to be something off metabolically. This is one of the ways to investigate that a little bit more. This concept of looking at methylation and looking at your detoxification pathways is for another podcast, but I just wanted to mention it here in terms of the components, because a lot of times when I'm diving into figuring out why someone's hit a plateau with their weight or why they can never lose weight, I also take into account if there's any mood stuff, that there might be more genetic mutations or genetic propensities that we're not looking at. And that's where 23andMe comes into play here. So if you're curious about that, take a look at my notes and the links at the bottom of my show notes for that. And I will do a podcast on methylation at some point here in the future. So stay tuned for that. So why do I love genetic testing so much? I think it's really one of the best preventative medicine tools. I don't think it's the only thing to pay attention to, though. I think that we need to take into account our current health status. It's really important to understand what you've done to yourself so far as to date. So however many years you've been on this universe, looking at your gut bugs, so your gut microflora, because they have a lot to do with the state that your body's in currently. Looking also at your environmental exposure, looking at stress, looking at literally everything that's happened to you up to this point, because it has a lot to do with your adrenal gland status, so your fight or flight gland status. It also has a lot to do with your thyroid, and your thyroid and adrenal glands have a lot to do with your metabolism. So genetic testing is not the end all be all. It's not going to solve all your problems by just getting genetic tested and then follow this food plan, for example, that Pathway Fit spits out for you. It doesn't solve all the problems. You have to take into account what's going on currently. And that's why I absolutely love the ability to be able to combine the current status of a patient with genetic testing to get a full picture as to what I'm working with the genetics and what I'm working with the current state of this individual. So, big thing to take away here is that genetic testing can give you a ton of information, and it can be amazing in terms of how to prevent certain conditions and what way to eat, what way to exercise, and what way you need to supplement with certain vitamins and minerals. But like I said before, make sure you take into account your current health status. And check out Arrival or Arrival. I don't know how to say it. That's embarrassing. I will figure that one out. Check out the link for them, a Seattle-based company that is taking into account your genetics in addition to giving you private one-on-one counseling with nutritionists and genetic counselors to help you to figure out and navigate the genetic testing and result universe. And they combine that with whole body medicine, which is awesome. They look at your current state of health, just like a naturopathic doctor would, and just like a functional medicine doc would too. Check out the link for 23andMe if you're interested in looking even more in depth into your genetics. And if you do 23andMe, make sure that you grab the Genetic Genie website. So click on that and get information in terms of all of your genetic mutations sent over to your doc if you're interested in that, because that gives us the best information, because the 23andMe results are just kind of general summaries. And honestly, if you are at all stuck in a plateau and trying to figure things out, by all means, hit me up, send me some messages. I love to hear from folks as to what you're struggling with, and I can guide you towards whether it might be better to go with the company in Seattle or to do Pathway Genomics on your own and take it over to your own doc. So, all that being said, I am really, really psyched about the future of genetic testing and what kind of information it can give docs. It almost makes our work a little bit easier. And if you are at all interested in trying to figure out your genes, go to the Pathway Genomics website and check it out. They not only have gene testing for nutrition and exercise, they also have some specifics for skin. If you're struggling with skin issues, cancer, things of that nature, it's really cool. So I love genes. I love to talk about it. Man, it's a fun topic. And so I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. And if you are all interested, please hit me up with questions, comments, etc. I love to hear from you. This has been another episode of The Health Fix. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to The Health Fix, the podcast all about taking control of your health, rebelling against aging, and having fun every day. A lot of patients ask me, do you think I'm aging too fast? So, I created an evaluation checklist for you to see for yourself. Plus, I created a resource guide to help you slow down the aging process right now. You can find it for free on my website, drjkrausend.com. If you like this podcast, help get the word out to others by liking it and rating it. If you'd like more natural health tips and want to join our Facebook community where I interact daily, click on the Join Group button on our website at drjkrausend.com.